How's it going, everyone? Today, our special guest is legendary character actor Vernon Wells. You've seen Vernon in movies such as Mad Max 2 as Wes, Interspace, Commando, the iconic role of Bennett, and numerous other movies and television shows. And it's great to finally have you on here, Vernon.
Thank you, John. I'm happy to be here, and I guess I should talk to you. I'll be back, John.
I appreciate that. With everything going on in the world with COVID, and obviously you're in an industry that was one of the first to shut down, it will probably be the last to come back like it was before. How has that affected you kind of mentally and physically?
Um, well, I think my wife would say that it's affected me mentally a lot because I'm a lot more aggro than normal. I tend to get a little bit like a cage bear after a while. It's it's uh, it's different. I mean, I notice that the industry is changing in a lot of ways, which are good, a lot of good ways. And then there's also a lot of bad ways that it's changing, as happens. But I guess I'm luckier than most people because I'm still being booked onto films that will be shot either at the end of December or into January, February, March, April of next year. People are organizing their schedules, so I'm being booked into things. But it's frustrating from the point of view of I've had about 4 or 5 films put into hiatus, and I think that's frustrating from an actor's point of view. That's what we do for a living, and
Right.
suddenly it's like all of that. That's where I get all of my energy out, is on the set.
One of the things I've noticed, you're very active too. Like if you go on the Internet Movie Database, it's like you're so busy. And to see you have that passion still, is that what drives you? Because you actually do really love what you do.
Yeah, I adore what I do. I love what I do. I have two passions in life. One is acting, and the other is my wife, unfortunately. Um, she would say. And I love acting, I love producing, and I love directing. I'm getting more into directing a lot of stuff with my partner, Brian Martin. And it's something that's never gone away. That for a kid that was born on in the country in Australia, lived with his grandfather for most of his young life until he became a young adult. I feel blessed that I've gone as far as I've gone. I mean, I have been incredibly lucky. I've been able to create characters that people seem to zone into and keep as part of. Never have a manager. They're going to ring you at all the wrong times.
It sounds it sounds like science.
That was my yeah. That's my manager ringing me to ask me a question. It's I just I haven't gone past the childish attitude of being surprised every time I'm hired. I always feel blessed when I do a film. I always do the best job I can do. And the funny thing is that while this COVID-19's going on, I'm winning Best Actor awards for films that are now being released onto the circuit, and it's like, oh, this is weird. It's stuff that I did 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago that is now coming out because of COVID.
Right.
And I'm like, this is ridiculous. But hey, I'm enjoying it. I think it's wonderful, and I just. I'm very upset for all the people that are suffering because of COVID. We are very blessed where we live. We live down by the coast. It's really nice. Not a lot of people in the community we live in have had COVID or suffered from it. People are very, apart from the people on the beach who seem to think that running around without a mask and cuddling each other is a great idea. Everybody else where I live is very conscious of staying apart. The restaurants won't let you in unless you have a mask. You have to sit outside, all this thing. So I think we haven't been as affected as a lot of people. The only person we knew that had COVID was our builder, who we found out because he went missing for like 6 weeks and we couldn't find him. And it turned out that he had contracted COVID, and then his whole family got it, and everybody got over it, fortunately. But he's the closest person to us that's had it. But we still, I still feel for all these people that are suffering, people that I know that have lost very close friends or family. It's, and then, you still have people saying, well, it's just like the flu. Well, you know what? I think if I got the flu and my doctor gave me a shot, I'd be over it real quick. This, it's the unknown, I think, that scares you. It's like going into a film that you don't know any of the actors, director, or anything else, and you don't speak the language. It's terrifying because you know that you're on your own in your own way. And that, I think, I had this chat to Gracie a couple of months ago, and it's still on my mind, is that my biggest fear is if that I did get it, I would die alone. And I think for people, or for humans in particular, that is a terrible fear, that you're going to be, you can't have that compassion before you die,
Right.
And I think that's probably the biggest fear I have through all this. But anybody that wants me to work with them is very conscious of being very COVID-19, making sure that we're following all the rules, regulations, and everything, so that everybody's safe.
Right.
Which I do appreciate. But once again,
right.
I wish we didn't have it, and I wish the whole world was back where it was. But
Before you got your big break in Mad Max 2 as Wes, you were doing a bunch of stuff, from salesman, working at the quarry, to theater, to everything in between. What from those learning experiences and previous jobs helped you become the character actor you became?
He's going to drive me mad. Hang on a sec. I'm going to switch my phone off.
I love it.
It's just, seriously, he hasn't rung me for like 4 days. Now suddenly he's got to ring me every time. There, I'm on airplane mode. He can ring all he likes. It won't affect me. It's funny because I never wanted to be an actor. Number one, it was one of those things that never ever entered my mind. My mother was a songwriter. She wrote for Slim Dusty, people in Australia. She was quite successful. Her songs got done. But when I was born, she gave that up, which was what happened back then. You didn't have a career and a child. You had a career or a child. And I came along, so my mother's career went down the toilet. And I became the one that seemed to be the only one in the family out of all my siblings that had any inclination to enjoy anything that had to do with music or anything else. And I thought I'd follow my mother's footsteps. I got into bands in Australia, big bands, and became a front of band, a singer, lead singer in some quite big bands. And that was where I saw myself, because it was like following in my mother's footsteps, letting her know that she had succeeded in her own way with me. Acting, when I was growing up and living on the farm with my grandfather, the only closest thing I got to that was radio programs in the morning before I went to school. Biggles and Superman and all of those wonderful 10-minute radio shows that came on early in the. They don't have them anymore, unfortunately, but they had them back then, and they always ended with a cliffhanger. The man with the kryptonite, will Superman survive? And you're terrified for 24 hours that Superman might die, forgetting, of course, it's Superman. But it was this whole, that was it for me. And it didn't appeal to me in a way that I wanted to be that person or do that thing. And I just started, I went back to Melbourne, lived with my mother when I grew up. and started going to school. I went to school down there, to uni down there. And my father wanted me to have a career. I was always a bit of a wanderer, and with the bands and everything. And he wanted me to have a career. He was very, very strict on that. So I got a degree in electrical engineering. And once I got that, I thought, well, I've got my degree in electrical engineering. That should satisfy him, and I'll just wander off and do what I want to do, which was sing in bands. Unfortunately, I was hurt quite severely in a accident with the equipment truck that we had for the band. And I compressed 3 vertebrae in my back, so I was having a lot of trouble standing and walking. And while I was recovering, our manager took my photograph around to all of the different agencies because he just wanted to get rid of me because I was a pain in his ass. So I was like, if I can get him a job, I'm not going to have to put up with him anymore. So I got a job virtually modeling. I started off as a model, did not like that. It was like boring after a while. And then they put me into being an extra in things, which I liked. The reason I liked it was I could go behind the camera and talk to all the crew. And I loved that. I was more interested in what they did than what I was doing in front of the camera. And I got to do a lot of shows as like the star's right-hand man who said nothing. He was just there, like the whole
Right.
that was always there, the shadow in the background. I did a lot of that, but it didn't really intrigue me that much, seriously. It did if I was riding horses or I was driving cars or trucks or something. That intrigued me. I loved it. I had a lot of fun. But mostly, I just was more interested in behind the cameras, and I actually started working for one of the top directors for commercials in Australia as his assistant. And I worked my way up from that to being a director in the company. And that's where I sort of, once again, I thought that was my career. I thought singing was, now I thought the directing was my career. And I got asked to do a stage play called Hosanna by Michel Tremblay, a French-Canadian writer. There's only 2 people. It's a 2-hander. It's about 2 hours of 2 people. And it's quite hard to go. It's a transvestite and their boyfriend. Well, that kind of, born in the country, wrestle cows, I'm going to play a what? No. No, not happening. And actually, my brother talked me into it. He told me I was a wimpy little homo twit to go and do it. It's like, oh, thanks, bro. I'm glad you're standing up for me. So I eventually said, okay, I'll do it. And as happenstance would have it, my grandfather always used to say to me that we have a career path and a life path, and we follow them or we don't. And if we veer off, we'll always be brought back if it's our destiny. And for some reason, I just kept being brought back to acting, And so I was doing this stage play, and as happenstance would happen, as I said, we used to have in Melbourne, Australia, they would have a Friday night late show once a month, so that everybody that was working in theatre could come to the 1 or 2 different shows that would play a late show. And George Miller, director of Road Warrior, his girlfriend at that stage, Sandy Gore, happened to come to the performance, saw me, rang up George and said, you've got to come and see this guy. He just...
Right.
And so George and I had no idea, by the way, who George was. I'd never seen Mad Max. He came down to Melbourne. We went out and had a cup of coffee, told dirty jokes to each other, had an hysterical time. He left. I went back to my life and had no idea why the hell I'd had coffee with this man called George Miller. A couple of months after we'd had coffee, my manager rang me and said, you got to go to Sydney for wardrobe and makeup tests for Mad Max 2. I said, what's a Mad Max 2? And she went, you've never seen Mad Max? And I went, what's a Mad Max? Sheesh. And she said, Vernon, do yourself a favor, go see it before you go to Sydney. So I went to the drive-in. It was at the drive-in. It was a double feature with Duel, which was Steven Spielberg's first movie.
Yep.
So you had Road Warrior and Duel. So I went and saw them at the drive-in, and the next day my manager rang me and she said, "So what did you think?" And I went, "Duel is such an amazing film. Oh my God, it is so good." And she went, "What did you think of Road Warrior?" And I went, "Oh, yeah, that was pretty good too." So I thought the Duel was the greatest thing, which was not a very auspicious start to my career. So I went up to Sydney, did the wardrobe and makeup things. George loved everything, and that's where it all started. I mean, it was destiny, as they say. I went and I was an unknown actor who became the co-star of one of the biggest films of the last 50 years or something back then. It was just huge. And
so as you start filming that role, at what point did you start kind of give kind of creative freedom to really build upon this character? Like in terms of the costume or dialogue or kind of like your mannerisms, it's so iconic that I tend to believe that this eventually became you, or you became this role halfway through, and George was just like, let's go with it.
Yeah, there was a lot more to it than that. George is very clever as a director for a start. What he did was, for about a week, all the cast had to write a biography of from the time we were born till the time the film started, of our character. So we had to do a background. And every morning we would go in, we'd all be sitting around a table doing basically a table read of what we had written. And Terry Hayes and George Miller and Brian Hanna, the three writers of the film, would critique it and say, "Oh, yeah, that's good, like that. No, throw that out. That's crap. And what would happen? Then we'd go home and rewrite that night. Excuse me. We'd then come back next morning. We'd do it again. So by the end of the week, we had established a character from the time he was born till the time the film started. We knew who this character was inside out. And from that, George allowed us to do the parts that we were doing. Like, we had built a character, the mannerisms, the way I reacted to things, that all came about because of writing, continuously writing it, and I became the character. I mean, you're right. The character became me. I became the character. So the most directing that George would do to most of us was he would say, "Give me 150%. So we would be way out there, and then he would bring us down, because he always liked that energy, that full on, especially with my character, because the big eyes and the close-ups in the camera being what I was, he always wanted that energy. And if it was too much, he could bring it back, but he could never take you up there. So he would always want you way above and then just bring you down. And so it was a learning experience for me, and an incredible one, because I got to hang out with George, and I got to hang out with Byron Kennedy, the producer that unfortunately was killed in the helicopter crash. And I even was in on some of the editing sessions in Sydney, watching how he edited the film. So I got to have this amazing apprenticeship with what my career was going to be from this man. And then I had Mel, who was the most amazing person to work with. He was just such a gentleman to me, and he was so helpful to me. And all the other actors in it, I would say that 90% of the other actors in that film had screen credits and were big. Mine was Vernon Wells. That was it. A lot of space under my name. There was nothing there, and yet everybody treated me with the most respect and gave me everything that I needed to make that character work, which I was so thankful for. Not while I was doing it. Strangely enough, while I was doing it, I didn't realize what they were doing. Sometime later, when I sort of understood what this was all about, I was like, oh my God, these people just went out of their way to make sure that I succeeded in that role, because it's the way I work now, is because when you succeed, they succeed. When they succeed, you succeed.
Right.
It became this thing that you're like, oh, now I get it. So it was kind of fun. And from that, Joel Silver cast me into Weird Science.
Which is interesting, because at first when I saw that movie, I'm like, well, this is like basically the same character, but it's more of a testament to how iconic Wes was in Mad Max 2 that Joel Silver was like, you can have fun with this.
Oh yeah, and it was funny because he had to fight Warner Brothers to get permission to do it, and they wouldn't give it to him. So they just changed, if you notice, the costuming a bit, the hairstyle a bit, and did things because he was determined that I was going to be, and also it was the director as well. They were determined that that was the character I was going to be, and that was the character that was going to come in, and I was going to have fun with it. And it was an amazing film to do, because if you remember that film, there were so many people in that film that went on to become major stars.
Oh, everyone. Iron Man.
Yeah, Robert Downey Jr., and things. So it was just one of those films. And I enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun. And while I was here, Joel said to me, I'm doing this film next. It's called Commando with Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'm an Australian. We don't know who Arnold Schwarzenegger is. He wasn't anything in Australia. Here he was because of the muscle thing. I had no idea. And I went, who the hell is Arnold Schwarzenegger? Whatever his name is. So it was just this sort of, whatever. So he took me to meet the director, and the director said, no, I've already chosen the person I want. And which didn't worry me. I was quite happy to go back to Australia, So I went home. And about probably 3 months later, a good friend of mine was chasing me all over Melbourne one night to try to let me know that I had a phone call from Joel Silver in America, and I had to ring him urgently. And of course, I being a total Australian, I went, yeah, screw him. I'll ring him tomorrow morning when I get up. And they were like, I don't think so. I think you'll ring him now. And it's like, why? Asshole didn't want me before. What's he got to do now? Total Australian. And so I rang Joel, and he said, I need you over here, and within 48 hours. You got 24 hours to get your life in order, and then you're on a plane. And I was like, what? Excuse me? Who? Where? And so basically, I flew back, arrived in the States, went to bed, got up 6 hours later, went to wardrobe. They had a fitting of the costume that had been worn by the previous actor.
Now, was that the original costume that he wore?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Totally interesting. When he was a little smaller than me, there was places that I thought I'd never use again. That costume was just a little tight. But anyway, they left things out, and, it was all this. Shaved my beard off just to get it, and made me look like bloody Freddie Mercury, which I never realized. The funny thing is, I love it when you are so blasé to what's going on around you. The first time I realized that was they did remember Mad Comics?
Yes.
They did a thing on Commando. I've got two of them. I've got one that was for Road Warrior, one that was for Commando. And they did this thing on Commando in it, and they had this thing where then across the front of my shirt it says, I am not Freddie Mercury on steroids. And I went, what the? Oh, shit. And it was the first time it ever dawned on me in that whole time. I'd never, ever realized that I looked very similar to Freddie Mercury, which to me is like the greatest compliment I could get. Freddie Mercury was one of my heroes. So
right.
Being told that I look like him was like, oh my God, that is so cool. But
what was your first scene with Arnold? Like, how did you meet him? Was it in the trailer, or were you like, hey, get the set, and this is it?
No, he was tied to a table, and I had a knife at his throat. It was actually quite interesting because I work a little differently to the American actors, because I kind of watch what's going on. I want to know where the camera is, where the lights are, where the actors are, what's going on, who's doing what. It was just the way I was taught with George. And we were doing the scene, and I was very sleepy anyway. I got a 12-hour flight and 6 hours of sleep. I was a little bit jet lagged. And I was just sort of walking through the rehearsals, like that. Arnie was a little upset, he sort of thought that, Joel, I'm not quite sure what's wrong with him, but it ain't going to work. And Joel was like, well, let's do this scene and see where we go with it, sort of thing. So, of course, the minute they said action, I just had this knife deeply embedded in his throat. doing the scene, when it was finished, Joel said, "So what do you think?" And his comment was, "Don't ever give him a real knife."
Awesome.
So we became good friends. I mean, both him and Mel are very much like kids in a toy shop. You know, they're both like big kids. They're always pulling pranks. But they're very professional when they work. But they're like big kids. You know, at times you sort of think, you know, I just want to take him outside and kick his ass. But then, you know, if you do that, he's going to kick yours, and it'll hurt more than yours did. So you tend to be very forgiving for all the bad jokes they do when they pull your trailer apart, and you know, just little things.
How fun is it for you to be part of this pop culture lexicon where your certain one-liners or how you say "Hello, John" or these different, even your character deaths in Road War or Mad Max 2 and Commando are so iconic that is it so the Commando, when you get impaled by the steam pipe, did you know at the time that would be a meme years down the road, or people talked about that, and that's just a classic scene?
No, I was just busy doing my job. The thing that did get me was that when in that scene, Arnie was determined to throw that piece of pipe into my chest, and the worst thing you can ever see as an actor is on a 6-foot high ladder, 6 foot of Arnold Schwarzenegger with a grin that goes all the way across his face, holding this pipe and going, "This isn't gonna hurt a bit, Vernon." And you're like, I am going to suffer. I know I will be bruised all the way to my elbows when he throws that. And of course, you know, he's hurling this thing down into my chest plate. But it was fun. I mean, you know, that's the kind of stuff the camaraderie on sets is, I think, what makes it work. And also, I think having fun with what you've got, you know, people tend to take it all too seriously. When if you're enjoying it and you're having fun doing it, it tends to come out in the film. You know, people tend to look at the film and they see something. You know, your eyes have always got to be alive. People always say to me, everything you do, you can see in your eyes, which is true, because your eyes, and I watch films and so many actors, their eyes are just like, there's nothing there. They're just normal. Whereas that should be where the emotion is playing if you're into the character. And
yeah, there's something about that character though. Like we talked kind of before we were live, but when I'm on the road doing security for the band Shinedown, Commando is one of those movies we always kind of reference with inside jokes or whatever. But the guitar player Zach will always go on the radio, "Hello, John," or he'll quote these lines, and it makes me really appreciate like growing up in a time where movies like that were so awesome, that you were a part of these movies. And to talk to you right now is just awesome.
Oh, you know, as I said, I've had an amazing career and still am having an amazing career. I think I'm blessed for what I've got. I would not be here, and I say this with all sincerity, I would not be here in this position talking to you if it wasn't for the little Buddhist over here that I'm married to. Because I was on a downhill run. I really was. Very quick downhill run that would have probably ended with me being put in a box.
Right.
But everything changed 28 years ago, and everything changed in my career 28 years ago. I suddenly started doing my job the way it was supposed to be done, and I haven't stopped working since. And I think it's all, I had too much too soon, too quick. And I didn't know how to handle it, and I didn't know what it was, and I could not cope with who I was. It took me 3 or 4 years to get around being Wes. It was something that people always mentioned to me, and it used to annoy the hell out of me. It was like, I had this dumb thing with, I'm an actor, for God's sake, you know, it's not the only bloody thing I can do. And then it was Commando, and it's like, oh, for God's sake. You know, it was like, would pound me with Commando, and it's like, you know, I have done other things, and they go, oh yeah, Weird Science was great, but Commando, you know, and and Mad Max, that's like Superman. That is, I couldn't handle it. I really couldn't. It was like this huge millstone around my neck, which followed me around and just wore me down. And I can remember doing an audition many years ago, where I walked into a room and I got the sides, and I went, this is like Mad Max 2, it was very similar type character, the whole thing. And I went in, and there's like probably 8 people at the table, and the casting director said, is there anything you need to know about the character? And I said, no, I think I've pretty much got it down. And they said, well, this is a very particular thing we want, so we'd like to tell you what we're looking at. And I said, well, whatever. So they sat there and they said, did you ever see the movie Road Warrior? And I went, actually, yes, I did. They said, well, the character in that of Wes, the gentleman with the mohawk. I said, uh-huh. They said, well, that's the kind of character that we're looking for. And I said, wow, okay. So while this is going on, I'm thinking I'm being set up by my idiot friends in one of those, gotcha things. So I'm playing along, like, oh my God, that's wonderful. And they said, so we're looking for that, just to let you know right off the bat, we're looking for that actor. We can't find him. No one's quite sure if he's in America or in Australia. And I said, oh. And they said, so if we did find him, he would probably be our first choice, but we don't want that to affect your audition. I said, oh, no, that's cool. So I do the audition, of course, and then they go, wow, that was good. That was not quite as good as the actor did. However, that was good. And you would be our choice if we can't find him. And I said, oh, that's great. Thank you. By this time, I've worked out. They have no idea who I am.
Wow.
And the guy said to me, would you happen to have a headshot? And I said, sure. And on my headshot was a little picture from Road Warrior and a little picture from Commando in the corners, pollywoggers. So I just threw it across the table to him, and he sort of went, oh, yes, this is Hood. And he looked up, and I went, I would have loved to have done your film, but unfortunately, I think I'll probably be busy when you're doing it. So, but thank you for the audition, and walked out.
Awesome.
I would not work for him.
I love it.
So pissed, but it was just that ridiculous. And it wasn't, I wasn't pissed because they didn't know who I was. I was pissed because they didn't do their homework. The logic is that, hey, we're having these people come into audition, so maybe we should see what they've done so we can talk to them. It'd be like you sitting there going, so what have you done? I know your face is familiar, but what have you done?
Right.
It'd be that kind of thing. And it's like, come on, give me a break. It's not that difficult. I mean, I did a podcast the other day, which was so funny. It was it was from Ireland, by the way. And the guy like you that's doing the interview, he was asking me questions and telling me things about Commando and that I had no idea. I was like, see, this was me. What? Seriously? Oh, crap. I didn't know that. We did? It was like he was coming out with all this shit. And I was like, dude, you amazed me. And he had found out things that I didn't know. I never knew who I replaced in Commando. I actually never wanted to, because as far as I was concerned, that really had nothing to do with me. They decided to replace him. That was it. He had the guy's name.
That's it.
I said, okay, thank you. That'll be in my brain now forever. I really didn't need that, but so it's kind of interesting at times. Just you do things, you feel that what you have achieved is great. I mean, don't get me wrong, now I am incredibly proud of what I've done. I mean, incredibly proud of my ability to be able to do what I do. But it took a long time for me to get there. I was always very skeptical of who I was, and then I let that become the millstone around my neck, the burden that I had to carry. I think I thought more than anything that I didn't deserve it. And so it became difficult for me. But then when I look back, all of those emotions that I had then were what drove my most iconic characters.
Right.
Which is the weird part of it, is that drove what I was doing, and that made those characters come to life.
I think it's so cool that, like you said, you put so much of these characters, and for the fans to still 30, 35 years later after these movies come out, people are still wanting to know you, see you, meet you, take pictures with you. And I know George Miller kind of opened up the world again with Fury Road, and people are always like, well, man, it'd be cool to have Vernon back and stuff, but you have such an iconic character in Mad Max 2 that if I see you in Fury Road 2 or Furiosa or whatever, I'm going to be thinking of you as Wes. And so that might be a testament to how good that character really is.
Well, that's exactly what George said to me, actually. When they were doing Fury Road, I had nothing to do with it, by the way, but there was this whole big thing on the internet, we want Vernon Wells in Fury Road. And I was in England at a convention, and the other writer that was writing with George at that time came up to me and he said, hi, Vernon, I'm so-and-so. I'm one of the writers, co-writer on Fury Road. And I said, oh, great, happy to meet you. And he said, I've got a message from George Miller. And I said, because I adore George, and George is a really close friend. And I think he's actually closer to my wife than me, but, that's all right. I forgive him. He said, George said that call up the hounds, you're not in the film. And I went, what? Like, what are you talking about? And he said, there's this whole big thing on the internet to put you in Fury Road, and George can't put you in it because you created a character that won't die. And he said, no matter what he does with you, if he puts a bag over your head, people will figure out who you are. And now we're doing Road Warrior 2, and that's not what we're doing. And I agree. I'm not upset at all. I said, I've already figured that one out. That I had my few minutes of glory, and I was proud of that. So it's just, you do them, and they become a little bit more bigger than life, and they tend to control you at times. And what you do and how you do it. But I've been very fortunate that I've had a few friends who are directors that I work with a lot, who have taken me from that and put me into films where I actually have to act. And I'm not saying I didn't act in those. I mean, where I actually have to act like an actor. I have to get out there and make it work because I'm playing the good guy.
Right.
To me, playing the villain is so much more fun, number one. And it's something that you have to create, and it's got nothing to do with you unless you're a moron. But it's got nothing to do with you. It's just a character you create. It's something you come up with.
So before I let you go, one of the things that really interested me, you got involved in video games.
Yeah.
So how did that come about? And if you can kind of quickly describe the difference between acting in a video game versus a movie.
Let me think. Actually, it came about because a long time ago, somebody said to me, you have got the most amazing voice. You've got to do video games. And I went, yeah, screw you too. And that was it, basically. I was not going to do it. And eventually I got talked into getting an agent for voiceovers, and that went exactly nowhere because they had no idea what to do with me. Then a good friend of mine managed to get me into his agency, and the gentleman that was my agent was fascinated with Road Warrior. So he pushed me really hard. So I became quite successful at doing voiceover. Then I got asked to do a couple of small Australian type, like there was one that was an Australian animated film, which I voiced one of the characters in, which was kind of fun. I was just doing an Australian. But then it moved on from there, and I got asked to do some of the biggest video games that came out. And the thing that I love about doing voiceovers is that I can drag my potty little butt out of bed, don't have a shower, don't give a crap, go to the studio, get a bottle of water and half an apple and sit my grotty butt down on a chair and work for the next 3 hours. And it's that. That's all they want. They don't care about this. They want that.
Right.
And that's what I love about it is because it's so much more fun. Where you're not having to learn the script, you're not having to create a character, you're not having to do anything. You go into a studio and you become the character there vocally. And you've got wonderful directors who know what they're doing, and they tell you, this is how I want it. That's how I want it. Do it this way, and you do it. And I've been, as I said, I've been incredibly fortunate to be in 4 or 5 of the biggest games out there.
Right.
Voice characters. But I always remember, before I go, well, we're nearly close to going anyway. The fun story is that I got asked to do Our Sex, Mankind Divided, which was monstrous.
Right.
And I went up to Montreal to do the voiceover for it, and also to do the mocap, motion capture. My first motion capture, yay! And I have photographs of me in a wonderfully green suit with little white bowls all over me. I look like somebody's chucked up on the floor, or their cat was sick or something. And I was on the set, and everything you do, of course, as you probably know, is you point to things and you touch things that aren't there. It's going to be done in when they do the game, because it's not you. They're creating a animation of you. I didn't realize that, so I've got cameras on me, up me, all over me, doing this thing. And the night before, they'd added quite a lot of dialogue to what I was doing, and they'd said, "Don't worry about learning it; just get it into your head. We're going to put it on the screen, and you can just read it, so you'll be fine." So I said, "Oh, great." So I start off, I'm doing my thing, I'm touching things, I'm moving things, exactly where they're supposed to be. And I turn around, and I'm supposed to be talking to my crew, who are to my left, but I'm facing the right, looking at a screen for the dialogue. And about 2 sentences in, I stop. And I got an earpiece in, and the director says, "Something wrong, Vernon?" And I said, "Yeah, I have a problem." And he said, what's the problem? And I said, "Well, all of the other characters are off to my left, and I'm facing the right. That's going to look a little weird, because I'm not looking at them while I'm talking." And there was this whole silence. And then this voice went, "It's animation, dumbass. We can have your head wherever we want it. Now just read the lines." I went, "Right. I knew that. I was testing you." I was like, actor. The brain doesn't stop. It's like, no, I can't be looking there. I've got to be looking here. You're not realizing that it's not you. You're going to become an animated character, which they'll put wherever they want it.
Well, I want to thank you, Vernon, for your time, and a special thank you to your wife for keeping you motivated and keep you going. And it's your roles in movies have been a big part of my life, and I want to thank you for the time, and much love and respect.
Well, thank you for even wanting to interview me. It's wonderful to be on your show, John. I love it. And if you are bored one day and you want to talk to me again, please let me know, and I'll come on and we can be bored together.
No, I'd love to. Before you leave, if you could say that Commando line, "Hello, John," I'm going to create that as a text. I'm going to send that to my guitar player, because he'll lose his mind.
Do you want that one, or "John, I'll be back"?
"John, I'll be back."
Okay, I'll do that one for you. John, I'll be back, John.
Vernon, you are the best.
Thank you, my friend.
And be safe, and we'll talk soon.
Same to you, please.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, my friend.
You as well. Be safe. Thank you.
Thank you, bro.